Welcome back to the month of February, where we're going to be talking a lot about the future, or what the potential future of EUCs, Onewheels, maybe some e-scooters thrown in there as well. Find out some information from videos we've seen in this last kind of 4 weeks or so. And we're starting off with EUCs this time around. Actually, from the last set of videos, we were looking at the V13, a lot of videos released about that. And Xiang here had released Can I Hit 55 miles an hour on his V13 when he was testing it out before sending it on. He completely padded up for this, obviously that's very important. Not going to spoil the video, here's one of his attempts going under kind of a really fast bridge. Done a really good job, but obviously don't be kind of testing the upper limits of EUCs unless you're willing to be prepared to have tumble. It is showing kind of the higher range of these, isn't it? So in the top end performance, I think in that one, did you hit somewhere around 51 miles an hour? Bonkers. I can only imagine that. I've been 32 miles an hour on my veteran Sherman, and even that feels really fast, so I can only imagine you feel like you're absolutely taking off on that thing. But then that brings into a good question. I was thinking about 55 miles an hour on a EUC. Is that really necessary? You're kind of nearly going kind of motorway, highway speeds almost at that point. Seems kind of crazy. And then I brought this video, or found this video by this YouTube channel called Madpack. Quite informative, quite interesting, and thinking about the kind of history of some previous monowheels from kind of many years ago. Quite fascinating to have a little watch of this one. Talking about some of the mistakes from the past and where they think the kind of EUCs may be heading to mistakes in the future. So it's really quite interesting. This guy's a good chatter as well. Very well produced videos, so it's nice. And I think some of the points he brings up are quite relevant. Is we've had a bit of a race to the top in terms of performance and price and battery range and such for EUCs. And where do we go from here now moving on? So we've got all the small wheels gradually seemingly increased in kind of price, range, power, hopefully build quality as well. And it seems like potentially we've culminated in the V13. Now, is anyone likely to make a bigger wheel than that, or something kind of with more power and a larger kind of tyre? I mean, possibly, but have we completely peaked in terms of the size of them? I think we should hope so. I think hopefully we have kind of peaked on that. There's interesting parts of this video where they're talking about monowheels from, like I said, many years ago. You'll see that on the thumbnail of the video, but they were fascinating objects as well. The way I see EUCs potentially moving forward would be people focus more on kind of features and build quality, certainly. The V13 came out with a lot of kind of additional safety measures that should hopefully get built into all future wheels as well. Talk about things like kind of passive cell balancing with the batteries as well. So hopefully improvements for EUCs, not necessarily kind of power and range and the size of the wheels, but kind of more towards the actual wheel quality, I should say. So not just performance. Hopefully that's where it matures to. And it brings us onto a video which Mr. Wrongway put out, which is obviously he's had a lot of kind of large wheels he's been riding. And this one is 8 reasons to love small wheels. Messing about on these, it shows you can do a lot of balancing, little tricks on them. It also goes into some pretty decent reasons about, why they are kind of better, or in some instances certainly fit into your lifestyle a bit better in other instances as well. Whether that's last mile commuting or just owning them and having them a place to kind of store in your kind of house or garage or whatever. So yeah, what's the future of EUCs? If you've got a kind of an opinion on that, let me know in the comments about it. I see it kind of, we've peaked with the size of the V13, and hopefully the people aim for kind of more quality and build quality between the size of the wheels now. There's still a big range of them. Moving on to Onewheel. What has been happening in the world of Onewheel? Well, nothing really in regards to the actual future motion Onewheel. They released some new flat kick foot pads for the GT. Basically, they just released an accessory that was actually a while back. It wasn't in the last couple of weeks. It's just something I'd not seen for a bit. Saw it on a video recently, and I was like, oh, something brand new. So they started releasing some more accessories, which is cool. But what are they actually doing? I know it's like a big company. It's based on products. They need to support them, but I don't know. It seems to take a long period of time for any material difference with kind of actual one-wheel future motion products to change or adapt or improve. Even the app, it's been a long time for it to improve. There's so many features on it that could be better. But where's all the kind of changes coming in the one wheel? Well, it's coming from the community. So then we had a video which came out through the Float Life. It's got Red, isn't it again? There's a shout out to Nico as well in there as well. We're talking about this controller that they've developed for the kind of VESC version of One Wheels, where you can actually modify the tilt of the board itself, which is fascinating because they were saying in the Float Life that they've never been able to use One Wheels to actually scale kind of quarter pipe here, you see, or the half pipe going across. But with this wheel, it actually shows you that it's something like that is possible, so you can actually get the nose up high enough to kind of go over the lip at the top, which is kind of fascinating. The video is really interesting to watch. You have to hold this controller, but you can change the actual pitch of it. But like One Wheels, you can change the elevated ride style, but you can do it on the fly, which is kind of fascinating. It just goes to show you the kind of level of ingenuity that the community has over kind of a big company trying to produce things. We also had the Float Life again releasing a new product, which is called the Sure Start, I believe. Trying to start this up, which is just a little kind of piece that you attach to, I think, the controller inside the board on the GT, and it's designed to mitigate some issues with regard to the board not necessarily starting up when you stand on it, or dipping out when your foot releases off the kind of foot pad momentarily. I think it's mainly they've noticed it with things like racing and trail riding and such. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously One Wheel were always against modifying boards. They've kind of changed the tune a little bit recently, and then the community is kind of producing things that will kind of massively improve the boards for some people. Like I wouldn't see this product as being much use for me. I mean, I ride an XR still, so completely different, but there's going to be some people which the Sure Start product is kind of a game changer for, and it's these little kind of incremental things that are changing One Wheel as a sport and as a kind of a rideable that make it a lot more interesting. So yeah, where's the future of One Wheels going? Probably down the community route, isn't it? People are going to incrementally improve the products, find out what works, what doesn't work, what the best accessories, best tyres and all the rest of it, until it becomes like a community standard for different rides like trail riding or street riding or racing. So it should be interesting, but we'll see where it goes, and also we'll see if there's any updates with the float wheel maybe next month or so, because that's hopefully releasing soon, so a bit of an interesting one, that, see what happens. This was a fun one. We got another video. This was a belt driven, it says VSC VESC One Wheel device. This guy has kind of homebrew kit, he's like made it himself, so it's kind of fascinating.
So it's rideable now. It's not finished, it'll never actually be finished.
That's quite a cool video, this. It's quite long, like 29 minutes. It goes into a lot of detail with it about the kind of building it, the kind of specs of it, and all the different parts that are inside the wheel he's built. Obviously very much a kind of home project, and he does say that it's one of those things that never get finished. So it's not going to be one of those kind of projects that becomes like a sellable product essentially. But pretty fun. I think belt-driven One Wheels were what they originally started out as, so it's kind of interesting that he's kind of gone ahead and tried to build one himself, kind of harking back to the old era of One Wheels. So yeah, kind of fascinating. There's a picture of like an old one there as well. But just side projects, you see it's all community based again for kind of different parts of One Wheels. And then kind of last thing, still future focused. One Wheel have put out a new podcast. It's got Manuel Soto in it, and it's from Seek and Shred. They do some events for One Wheel races, and most of the podcast is focused on kind of One Wheel racing, where the future of that's going, and kind of the community events that are going on. They mentioned some which are outside of the US as well, so there's some we mentioned last time about one being in kind of Scotland, and a few others around different countries as well, so it's becoming kind of more of a worldwide kind of sport now, which is kind of cool. But again, hour-long podcast, pretty interesting if you want to listen to people talk about One Wheels and what's going on in the racing leagues at the moment. how they're changing some of the kind of rules for the future as well. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And yeah, they're all good chatters on here. Okay, and then what we're moving on to last is really brings a bit of e-scooters back into it. So there's a news story which came out, and this is probably more UK specific. It says Paris looks to ban extremely divisive e-scooters as UK drivers are told to leave extra space. So this is in relation to the rental e-scooters that you can legally ride around towns and cities in certain places, because you can rent them, which apparently means you then have insurance on them, even though you don't actually need to really have much else in terms of kind of helmets or anything like that. But anyway, beside the point. So this was interesting because they were talking about how people in kind of Paris have kind of been getting a bit annoyed by the rental scooters. One of the things that I always thought was like rental scooters, because people don't own them, you don't really have any incentive to maintain them, look after them, you know, or treat them well. And they do mention this here, as that people were just kind of discarding them wherever, because that was one of the things you could do. Just dumping them on pavements, they were just kind of clogging up space, and they were generally a bit of a nuisance, so people weren't really setting a good example riding them anyway. So they're having a bit of a, a referendum, they say. It is. A referendum is scheduled for the 2nd of April, saying residents will be able to decide should they stop doing the rental schemes. And the interesting thing about Paris is they actually do allow private e-scooters to be used on roads and cycle paths, not on pavements, which seems reasonable, I could say. But then people are saying basically that the rental schemes in some of the cities could be a bit of an issue, which you can see in certain places. People, I mean, realistic, isn't it? If you own your own e-scooter, you're probably going to look after it a bit better than if you rented one for kind of 30 minutes and you're not really bothered about it. So yeah, kind of interesting. The reason I bring up e-scooters is because generally any of the legislation for e-scooters would be first before then anything would be considered for kind of other micro-mobility or kind of PEVs. It's like they're never going to bring out a one-wheel set of legislation, are they? It's kind of, that'd be kind of funny, or probably ridiculous, I guess, but it would get lumped in as like a micro-mobility set of laws, whereas in the UK they're very solely focused on specifically pointing out e-scooters as being the thing they focus on. Apparently our government can only focus on one device at a time, which is quite frankly embarrassing. Yeah, we had here we go, another news story which actually talks about the kind of pedestrian jungle around Paris over rented e-scooters. That's actually from last year, that's story, so it brings up some more information about it. Again, I'll put the links in the video there. I don't think I'd highlighted anything specific here. No. There's just more information about kind of the setting for it. And let's see. Yeah. In terms of the UK, looking forward to legislation. We've not really had anything. Basically, in the Queen's speech, which was read by the King to be, they mentioned that they would get through some legislation for it this year, and then they've basically said they're not going to. So it's been delayed. Looks like it's going to be maybe next year that they're going to look at doing it, and it's because our government's basically inept. They've changed the Transport Secretary multiple times, and it says here, this is actually, again, this is an old story, one that I found about this Adam Norris, who has a vested interest in these scooters being legal because he has a business that's based in there, but it's from last October. But the quote I liked in there was he was talking about, he said he's been working closely with the government on the matter. I don't know, no one knows if that's true. He thinks it'll be legalised at some point in the next 12 months, but that really relies on the government not delaying everything. We're the last major country not to have legalised. Yeah, I don't know. And people are using them. We see e-scooters all day, every day, especially private ones. People, like, you get a lot of teenagers riding them around, not necessarily sensibly. You don't tend to see many helmets and such on those. But you can buy them legally, so people are definitely going to be using them on the roads. And it's the same for EUCs and Onewheels. We have no legislation, essentially. They just classify them as being a motor vehicle. So there's a law from 1988 which basically says you're not allowed to use them. Our government sucks. Anyway, so that's something slightly more interesting at the end. Did anyone want some ASMR? This was a video about an EUC. This guy mic'd up his Onewheel. No, not his Onewheel, sorry, his EUC. The Sherman S. I'll leave you with this.